Landon McCool from the Locked On Cowboys podcast is going to join us now, and he's probably, depending how long he's been watching, he may be about to tear down both of our theories on how to kick ass, or he may just think we're idiots. Hey, Landon.
I just want to make sure that someone told you that je ne sais quoi literally translates to I don't know. So Jesse, you were right on point with your guess.
Oh, there we go, baby.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. You don't really know.
Do you want
the styles?
You nailed it. So,
do you want to play our game that we give you zero time to prep for that we just played? I don't know if you heard it, but
no, I did.
Okay.
I think it's interesting. I think both of y'all's choices were interesting. I do think pass rush makes the most sense because you have pieces there, right? And you very kind of casually just mentioned trading for Myles Garrett and drafting Jelon Walker. I think the only problem with that plan is that if you trade for Myles Garrett, you probably don't have the pick to take Jelon Walker, right? Like, because you're gonna have to give away.
Is it Jelon? Is that how? Do I need to get ready? Is that Jelon?
Am I saying it wrong? I think it's Jelon Walker.
No, I've never heard it said out loud. I just always have said Jalen, and so if it's Jelon,
that's the problem with all the pre-draft, pre-combine stuff is we read these
both
guys'
of you.
names and we don't actually
Je ne sais quoi. Well, what is it?
Yeah, his first name is Je ne sais quoi.
Je ne sais quoi. Exactly.
Don't really know.
Yeah. Listen, I'll alternate. I'll throw in a third option, kind of a middle path option. What if you take Tyler Warren at 12 and you try to improve your run game and your pass game by getting a guy and then start running some more 12 personnel, throwing out of some 12 personnel? That's how I think you get into.
But what do we do now with the offensive line? Because if we take Tyler at 12, then we still have to
trying
go.
To tear down his.
No,
Nobody trying to tear down yours.
I'm asking just for clarification. We still got to deal with Steele. We still have to deal with Guyton. We're still that's going to be a tough sledding when it comes to the run game because, those guys still have to play.
Those guys are still there, yeah, for sure. Listen, I like your Ronnie Stanley idea. I don't think you discount that. I mean, I think the offensive line is going to need some shuffling. Clayton Adams is going to come in here and want to do a bunch of things on the offensive line. But I think that having another big-bodied tight end playing more 12 personnel will actually cover up some of your pass protection deficiencies, help in the run game and in the pass game, because I think it's easier and more efficient to throw the ball out of run formations. And I think that you'll see stats talking about that all the time. Throwing the ball out of 12 personnel is a very effective way to throw the football. So you don't have to spread the teams out in order to effectively throw the football.
It's Landon McCool. You can hear him on the Locked On Cowboys podcast. And I saw that one of the things that you guys talked about, I believe this was yesterday, was something that we've kicked around a little bit before. And the idea that, is it possible the Cowboys could use their first pick on an offensive lineman, and who fits that mold, and does that get wonky considering what you did last year in the first round, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I think the addition of Clayton Adams kind of changes the angles on all these things anyways, right? Like, I'm interested to see what he thinks about Terrence Steele. I'm interested to see what he thinks about guys like Brock Hoffman, who are kind of borderline starters, or it's like, do you want to give this guy an opportunity? So I think, when you consider that, I think likely you have to kind of break your thinking about the way the Cowboys have been talking about the offensive line previously, because they're going to be, coached by somebody who's coming in with fresh eyes. He's not going to have any of these preconceived notions. He's just going to go what's on tape. So I think that it's all on the table. Guyton moving to right tackle, them, cutting Terrence. I mean, look, you want to keep Osa, maybe you cut Terrence Steele, you move Guyton to the right side, and then you solve the offensive line problem in the draft, and you take Terrence Steele's money and try to, invest that back into Osa. There's lots of ways to kind of skin this cat, right? And I think that leveraging the strength of the draft is probably the way to do that. But largely to your point earlier in the show about Osa and his market, this is also a very deep defensive tackle class, and I wonder if this is going to have an effect on Osa's market there as well. So I think you have to look at what is the draft is going to provide for you, and then kind of make decisions sort of on that.
You brought up Clayton's, who they just signed, who they just brought over from the Cardinals. And one of the players that he had over there was it Will Hernandez?
Yeah, Will Hernandez.
Yes.
Will Hernandez. Could that be an option? I know that he missed some time last year due to an injury, but would that be a situation where you go, all right, this is a guy who's been in this league for a while, familiar with the Cowboys because there's a time with the Giants. Could you bring him in and kind of solidify a little bit of that that guard situation, and it's a familiar face and a familiar name that Clayton can kind of go with to kind of shore up, and then now you can use those other options as tackle and stuff like that in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. It makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, just because the quality of the player, him being a free agent, him having experience with Clayton Adams, all of that makes sense. The only thing I have issue with is it feels like the guard center spot is the one place where the Cowboys have some pieces to work with, right? I wish there was a Will Hernandez tackle equivalent, right? Like that's kind of where I would like to go. But I get what you're saying. I mean, listen, I'm not necessarily a fan of moving Tyler Smith out to tackle. But I think if you signed Will Hernandez and you felt good about an interior three that included Hernandez, and then let's say Hoffman or they kick out Beebe to left guard and Hoffman plays center, I could be convinced to move Tyler Smith back out to tackle in those situations if you feel like you're going to get 5 solid offensive linemen and you're going to move forward with Tyler Smith as a tackle kind of from now on. I just think they need to stop flopping him back and forth.
How do you think that the Cowboys should deal with Osa as we're on day one of franchise tagville?
I think the transition tag is an interesting thought, but all you're doing by putting the transition tag on him is kind of preventing yourself from negotiating against yourself, right. But I really don't think that that's an issue. That's the thing is I saw Bob's tweet this morning and it's a good thought, but the truth of the matter is that who was it? The defensive tackle for the Ravens last year?
Madubuike.
Yeah. He got 4 years, $98 million, so I have a feeling that 19, or $18 million, whatever the transition tag, it's not going to do it. I mean, frankly, the franchise tag, maybe the kind of starting spot for these top 2 defensive tackles on the free agent market. So I think it's a good thought. I just think that almost immediately you're likely going to get somebody to match that and go well beyond whatever it is, $18.5 million.
Keeping along the lines of the defensive tackle position, this draft is one that is littered with interior defensive linemen. Do they come to a point in time where they just go, you know what, we'll let Osa walk? And if they do, where should they start looking at, or where would be some options that they can turn their attention to in the draft and go, all right, maybe not a first-round pick, but maybe a guy in the later round that can come in and help this football team immediately?
I think even if you re-signed Osa, I still think you had work to do at defensive tackle, right? So that's the real problem here. So I think if you don't sign Osa, you need to plan on drafting a defensive tackle in the first 3 rounds. Period. So I would look at someone like Norman Lott, from Tennessee, Walter Nolan. Let's see where he falls. I mean, I've seen him anywhere from the end of the first to the middle of the second. There is a ton of guys out there. Both of the Michigan guys are likely going to be either gone, or at least one of them will certainly be gone by the time the Cowboys pick in at 12. But there, you can probably get the other guy at the back end. There's the kid from Toledo that really showed out well in the Senior Bowl. I think that there's lots of names that you can get, bodies, especially if you want a nose tackle. There are a ton of guys like that you can get in the middle rounds that I think will fit the bill if you're looking for just simply a nose tackle. So, but I think either way, if the Cowboys let go of Osa, they're going to need multiple defensive tackles. And even if they re-sign Osa, I think that they're probably still going to need to come out of the draft or at least undrafted free agency with at least one solid nose tackle pickup.
Who is the best interior defensive lineman when you're looking at what Eberflus's scheme is? He's not a guy who's going to bring heavy pressure. He's not a guy who's going to have exotics. Things happen on that defense. So those guys are going to have to win up front with a lot of specialties, right? With technique, with power, with quickness, with finesse, with moves, hand movement, body movement, all that kind of thing.
Graham.
Yeah.
If he's not there,
he's right.
We can't.
Listen, you're right, Jesse. Like with this defense, it's more so than Quinn. It's about winning with your 4, right? And not like trying to be tricky about it, not like sending a bunch of extra blitzers. Whether that's a good idea or not, that's kind of the way the defense runs, right? So you need guys who not only are going to win as pass rushers like Osa will, but you need guys who can also win in the run game too, who can sustain their gap, who are gap sound players in the run game. Obviously, Mason Graham is the guy that kind of fits that bill better than most. I would say if you're just looking to kind of compare body types, I would just look for a slightly bigger 3 techs. I think normally in Quinn or some of these other defenses, you're looking at 280 to 290 pound guys that are jets that are trying to get upfield and just trying to get in through the crack and disrupt the run game on the way to the pass. Now you need guys who could rush the passer, who have technique, but who could also sit in the gap and contain that gap and not be moved. And that's a little bit of a taller order, just like the defensive ends they're going to need bigger defensive ends who can rush the passer and be explosive. Those are kind of planet theory players. It's the same thing with these sort of interior defensive linemen. You need a real kind of special athlete that can do both rush the passer and sit in the gap and occupy space.
You think Aaron Donald's busy next year?
No, Aaron Donald would be great. Yeah, we'll bring him in. I know you've already mentioned at least one of these names. You might have mentioned both, but just as you're describing that, when you're talking about guys who can do sort of your 3 technique stuff in terms of winning as a rusher, but they're not undersized and not necessarily going to get bullied, could you cheerlead for either Ole Miss's Walter Nolan or Oregon's Derek Harmon to make it all the way to 44? Those are over 300-pound guys that I feel like bring that sort of thing to the game.
Yeah, Harmon, I think, is more likely to be there at 44 than Nolan. Nolan is a guy who was...
I've seen him mocked at 12, and I talked to Trevor Sikkema about it on the air, and he was like, the only reason that sounds weird is because people haven't mocked it there yet. And I'm like, he is my second best D tackle, and he does have incredible physical traits.
Well, look at it from the scout's point of view. Like, he was the number 1 prospect in, I think, the 2021 high school class in the country. So, like, this wasn't a sudden, like, this wasn't an out of nowhere thing. This was something that scouts have been waiting for a while, and he was kind of a late bloomer in his career. I think that they look at that pedigree and that athleticism, and they're seeing, oh, he's now finally emerging. And this is a rising player. He's still very young. So I imagine that, yes, Nolan is going to continue to rise up boards. I bet he has an incredible combine. And I think that, when it's all said and done, he could be someone that we're talking about in range at 12 just because he's risen so much. I wouldn't be shocked. Who was the other name, I'm sorry, that you mentioned?
Derek Harmon, Oregon.
Yeah. Harmon, to me, like, I really like him a lot. I mean, again, another guy who I think really fits the bill of what we were just talking about, right? A big body defensive tackle who is athletic enough to kind of get in the backfield and create havoc, but also kind of mix it up in the middle in the run game. Just another guy that just kind of sort of a late bloomer, right? Kind of transferred to Oregon, had a pretty good career previously, but really, really exploded onto the scene this year. I think that he's a guy that kind of really fits the bill of what you're looking for in an under tackle, and I think you could probably even see him in some snaps and nose tackle in certain packages.
Landon, we appreciate you, brother. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for having me, guys. Good to see y'all.
We all silly like the mayor.